All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We will be reviewing our upcoming Spring 2021 release. My name is Jeannie Clark, and I will be your host. And joining us from our customer care team, we have Brittany Wood and AJ Ootman. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. We also have our support team, Connor and John. We have Carolyn Milliman from our marketing team, and we have Lee Aries and Eric Dodson on the call as well. So we got most of WebCheckout on this call. So as a reminder, the intent of our study hall webinar is to inform our customers of new features in the upcoming release, and then also to bring you all together to have discussions on what's new and share best practices and new ideas. Before we go into the webinar content, just this webinar will be recorded or is currently being recorded. And for audio quality, everyone is on mute. As questions or comments come up, please do use the Zoom chat feature. AJ and Brittany will be responding to your questions, and some questions we will reserve for discussion if we see that it needs more discussion. And please be sure to send your chat to everyone. And then finally, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar at the end of the week. All right, so let's review what we will highlight today. So the Spring 2021 release highlights. We will be reviewing visual improvements to WebCheckout. We'll also be reviewing a new arrangements to the organization and checkout center settings. They're now being organized by function. We've also made improvements to the default allocation times. We've updated the calculation of late resource expected return time. We'll also preview the new resource chain of custody tab. We'll also go into resource type updates, including policy inheritance and merging policies. Unserialized property has moved to the resource type level. And there's now a resource selection option, and we'll go into these details today. Within a checkout or reservation, we now show the policies that are being applied to that allocation. You also have the ability to download up to 100 agreement forms, invoices, and tickets for bulk printing. We'll preview the new facilities application. The facilities app was sponsored by Franklin and Marshall College, and it's used to manage keys for physical locations. And then just an honorable mention, there have been several improvements made to accessibility in Patron Portal. Before we jump into WebCheckout, you've seen this on the email, but I do want to highlight that the spring release, starting this spring release, versions will be referred to by the season and the year of the release. The previous release, version 12, will be the last numerical release name. If you call it version 13, we'll still understand what you're referring to, but we'll come back and say, yes, the spring 2021 release is available. All right, so let's go into WebCheckout. Okay, so this is the new spring 2021 release. So this may appear to be of minor significance, but we made several visual updates to WebCheckout. First, the icons you see here on the menu option, the new reservation, the find upcoming, the return icon, and the rapid return resources icons were updated in the navigation bar as well as the middle of our front page. Okay. You may also notice that the secondary color of WebCheckout has been updated to the shade of blue. So to see a before and after, so here's the after, and I'm going to click here to my before. This is version 12. So in version 12, you have these different icons, same function, just the older icons, and then this purple color has been removed. I'm going to click back here to version spring 2021. The secondary color change, you'll notice throughout the application. So with any find screen, I'll click on this incoming header here to go to my find checkouts screen. You'll see the find screens have this updated blue. And then if you go into any detail screen, click on a checkout here, you'll see the checkout, or excuse me, the details have also been updated with the secondary color. So it's a minor, it might seem minor, but I think it makes the application look crisp and makes it a little more modern. All right. And continuing with the visual updates and to better represent their function, in the organization and checkout center details, we've organized settings and policies to reflect how they affect operations and patron usage. So I'll highlight this change from the checkout center details, and we'll go to the checkout center details by clicking the hyperlink here to the checkout center directly from my checkout. All right, so I am in the general tab of the checkout center detail. As a reminder, the left-hand side of your web checkout screen always tells you what screen you're in, and I'm highlighting the general tab. I'm going to go back to version 12 so you can see what it looks like in previous versions. So in version 12, we have contact information as well as circulation information and time settings. We have all of these different and important settings all in the general tab. What we've done in the newer version is we've specified and moved settings based on their function. So in this spring release, the general tab just includes contact information as well as your locale settings. And we also moved the managing organization information in the general info tab. So if your checkout center does have to move to another web checkout organization, we can do that from here. And with that, we were able to remove the single use tab of the organization tab, right? So the settings that were in the general tab, they've been moved to the operations, allocations, resource types, patron portal, and billing tab based on their function. Okay. You may have also noticed there's no longer a policies tab, but don't worry, your policies are still present, they're still here, but they've also been relocated to the allocations, resource types, patron portal, or billing tab, again, based on their function. Okay. So let's begin and review these tabs. So we have the operations tab. Here, this is where several of the general or the settings that were previously on the general tab have been moved here. And so these are functions that affect your operations. So, what is your checkout or allocation mode, shopping cart or timeline scheduler? Do you require scan to pick up or return? For those with RRT, do you allow web checkout to select those items? And then do you allow for rapid return or the return all function? So these are very operation specific. So they've been moved to this tab. Additionally, operators who have access to the checkout center, you'll see that information listed here, right? Still managing operators, that's at the organization level, that has not changed, but just the information of who has access to the checkout center is listed in the operators tab. Okay. Next, the allocations tab. You'll find all the policies that apply to the entire allocation, such as printing agreement form, the default checkout lengths, the per patron max allocations, minimum intervals, for example. The other settings that were on the general tab are now located under the allocations properties section. Okay. Including this new setting here called a step assignment strategy. We'll come back to this a little bit later today. But under the allocations tab, we also have circulation windows. This was a recent feature added in version 11, which controls the number of pickups and or returns allowed within a specific window of time in order to monitor the numbers of patrons coming in and out of the checkout center. So we all know social distancing and just making sure there's not too many people in a checkout center is still very important. So circulation windows help to prevent overcrowding or too many people coming in or out at once at the checkout center. Again, we reviewed this feature, circulation windows, in our November webinar. So if you need a refresher, you can always go back to that, or our documentation site has this information as well. And then finally, in the Allocations tab, we have honor fines and holds option. So if you do honor or you do not honor holds, fines, and lates from other checkout centers within the organization, that option is here. This honors, holds, and fine, as well as these policies, they were originally or previously found on the Policies tab. Okay. The Resource Types tab, again, policies that affect the resource type usage. So you have usage limits per day, per week, as well as reserve limits. We also have these properties were previously on the General tab, have been moved to the Resource Type tab. Patron Portal tab, all of the Patron Portal settings still apply, but the three policies that affect Patron Portal have been moved to this tab here. And then finally, the Billing tab, you'll find your policies to manage late fines and usage fees. And then the billing information and billing properties that were previously on the General tab have been moved here as well. So this isn't to confuse you all or to give you a headache, but instead we're trying to organize and represent these settings based on their function. And also it clears out the General tab because that actually gave me a headache. It was too much information in one place. So we hope you find this improvement to your benefit. And hopefully it's not something you'll go to much. Once you set it, it's there. It's probably something you won't have to visit too often. Okay. Now you'll see the same layout in the organization details. So I'm going to click and go to my organization by using that same process of clicking the hyperlink here. Now I'm in my organization details screen. We have the operators tab that hasn't changed, but we have the allocations, resource types, patron portal that's new, and billing tab, and the policies. If you set them at the organization level, they've now been reallocated to one of these 4 tabs. Okay, now our next improvement is the update to the default allocation times. So as a reminder, the default allocation times, which are now located in the Allocations tab at the Checkout Center or organization, this property sets the initial pickup and return times, both in WebCheckout and Patron Portal. In the spring release, there is now the option to set the pickup or return time to a fixed time. So that's a certain date and time, or to the end of term. So if you guys do long-term checkouts or reservations and everything needs to be back at the end of term, you can have it set to that end of term date and a specific time. Now, again, as a reminder, the term dates are set in the organization calendar. I have my summer term here and it ends on June 26th. And my allocation, I have it set, my return time, end of term at 5 p.m. If I go back to my calendar, it was June 26th at 12 a.m. So it's 1 minute past 11:59 on June 25th. So if I go to a new reservation and I go to my scheduling tab here, I'll see my end time. It's end of term, but I set the time for 5 p.m. So it's June 25th at 5 p.m. Again, these dates and times can be set, can be edited when you're creating a checkout or a reservation, but this is a nice default, an improvement. Okay, another new improvement is the calculation of expected return time of late resources. So in previous versions, and we've had several tickets from customers thinking this is a bug, it actually was expected behavior. WebCheckout adds 1 minute from now to the overdue schedule of the resource. So for the purpose of future scheduling these resources. So WebCheckout assumes that late resources are going to be returned immediately. So something that it's currently late could be reserved to be picked up, let's say in an hour or even 1 minute from now, and it's still out and late. So in the spring release, we've updated this calculation, and now WebCheckout adds the amount of time the resource is already late to reduce the chances of late resources being reserved for an upcoming reservation. So if something is already a week late, WebCheckout will add a week to its reservation time or its unavailable time. So the soonest it can be scheduled for the next reservation would be 7 days from now. Okay, so this is best to demonstrate. I'm going to go into, actually, before I do that, let me cancel this creation. And I'm going to demonstrate this by starting in version 12. Again, you can tell it's version 12 because it has the purple coloring here. I have two identical checkouts in version 12 and in the spring release. So this checkout 1407, it was due yesterday at 3 p.m. There's one item, this Sony body kit number 1. And in my spring release here, I have a similar checkout 11888 due yesterday at 3 p.m. Same item, body kit number 1. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in version 12. I'm going to click on this checkout. Again, the items are overdue. They were expected back yesterday at 3 p.m. I'm going to copy this allocation, and I'm going to make a pickup for today at 3 p.m. And I have other warnings that they have late checkouts, and I do have other policies, but I'm not getting the resources unavailable warning. So I can commit and I can confirm this reservation. And now if I go back to my home screen here, I have an upcoming reservation for today at 3 p.m. for something that's checked out and late. Okay. In the spring release, let's do the same thing. I'm going to copy the allocation. I'm going to schedule it for a pickup today at, let me go to the timeline scheduler here, excuse me. Today here at 3 p.m., today is the 19th. And I have the resource is unavailable for the requested time. Okay, because the item is almost 24 hours late, even if I try to commit here, I'll show you the warning message here. I have the override capability. Oh no, I can't override this because it's unavailable because it is still late. The earliest I can create this checkout would be for tomorrow. So if I go back to the timeline scheduler, I can adjust this for tomorrow. And if the item is still out and late, of course I can't pick it up. But this new calculation to the estimated return time of late resources, this should reduce the likelihood of scheduling late resources for upcoming reservations. All right. Hopefully you're all happy with that new feature. So I did make this reservation, but this is for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Okay. All right. Now, this update to the expected return time of late resources, this is a default behavior. There's no settings to enable this feature. This is just comes with the new upgrade. Okay, now let's move on to the new chain of custody tab or tracking in the resource records. So for those operations that manage long-term loans, such as laptops to faculty and staff, or even keys to buildings, we've added to the assign function for non-circulating resources. We just made its own space in the resource record. So I'm going to go into my resources menu, find resources. And this is also a new feature of the new spring release. When you're searching for a search term, so add search term, you can now type in what you're looking for. So I'm looking for status. Oh, it's already there. and I'm going to look for something that's assigned. Assigned is also a new search term field, so you can look for all resources that are currently non-circulating and assigned to a person or a department. We'll go into this really coveted item, my stapler here, and I can see that it is currently assigned to Sean with an expected return date of July 30th, 2021. Okay, and in the chain of custody record here, I could see that it was previously assigned to Brittany. She had it from May 15th to May 18th. Okay. Now, if the item is circulating, the assigned fields will not be available. Instead, you'll be making a checkout or a reservation. But in the chain of custody, you'll find similar information about who had access or who had that item checked out. So if I go to, actually, we'll go to resources, find resources. I'll just change this to status of checked out. We'll go to my Canon 5D camera kit, number 2, and I can see here starting April 16th, it was checked out and who all had access to this resource. Okay, so hopefully you find this information useful as well. All right, now let's review updates to the resource type. We'll go into the resource type detail. I like using the hyperlinks on the left-hand side here. We'll go into the Canon 5D MK4 body kit. Okay, we're going to start with the policy tab. Now, the policy tab still resides in the resource type tab or in the resource type detail. That hasn't changed. We still have all the policies here, right? And we're going to review the new inheriting policy inheritance properties. And we're going to scroll down here to the bottom. This is a new section here. Inheriting policies, it copies policies from one resource type to another. So this is a great feature if you have several resource types with the same policies. You can set it at one type and then use this inherit function to copy policies from one resource type to the other. So I'm in my MK4 body kit. Let's inherit policies from my Canon EOS 5D body kit. Okay, and we'll set it. Now, because we're now inheriting policies, I can no longer edit my policies at the MK4 body kit. It's whatever policies are set at this parent type, policy type, it's now being applied to this inherited child of the policy type. Okay, so let's go into the number 3 body kit. I'm going to click on this chain link to go into the 3 body kit here. So if I needed to change any policies here, I can adjust the policies here, save changes, and then it's going to apply at the resource types that are children of the policies. So change it at one level, it's going to affect all of the inherited resource types. In addition to the policy inheritance, there's this new feature called merge usage limits. Merging usage policies, it will then create a usage group of resource types. And with usage groups, not only are you copying the same policies, but it takes it a step further, and the usage limit policies are applied to and shared among the resource types. So let's say, for example, your center only allows to check out or reserve one camera kit at a time. It doesn't matter if it's a Sony camera kit, a Canon 3, Canon 4. You have several different resource types, but you can only check out one of that type. At the child level, because that's where all of the policies are actually set to, but at the child level, so at the level 4, you will select the merge usage limits option. And now all of the policies, the usage limits, are shared within the usage group. So if there are other resource types listed here, all of those policies or all these usage policies will apply to those and should be shared within those resource types. So to best demonstrate this is, as I mentioned, we have that I only allow for one camera kit between the MK3 and the 4 to be checked out. So I have the resource type limit per patron set to 1. You can only reserve or check out one of these at a time because I'm merging the policies. And again, the best way to show this is to demonstrate. So I'll create a new reservation. I have to add a person first. Oh, let me cancel this creation. Create a new reservation here. We'll make one for my best friend Harry. We'll go to the contents and we'll just add by resource type. It was my Canon number 4 and then my Canon EOS number 3. Now I should get an override here, and I do resource type limit 2, allocating resource type exceeds limit of 1. Like you can only reserve one resource of the type. And since I'm merging the policies, it's applying to both types. I think this was one of our most requested features for policies. So this is a new feature that I hope many of you can utilize. Okay. All right, now we'll move on to the updates to the resource type admin tab. We're managing unserialized functions at the resource type level. You should only notice this if you're creating a new resource type, or if you're creating a new resource, or if you're moving a resource that's currently serialized to an unserialized. It shouldn't really affect your day-to-day. But let's go ahead. I will find a resource type, and I'll use this unserialized search term, and we'll click on this converter. And in the admin tab of the resource type, there's now an unserialized field. If I go into the resource record, that field is no longer editable. Again, it's set at the resource type level. Right. If you currently have resource types with multiple unserialized resources, or a resource type that includes a mix of unserialized and serialized items, at upgrade, we will create a new resource type. It will be nested under the existing type, and then it'd be appended with the term unserialized, and your unserialized resources will be moved into this type. So again, you should only notice this update if you're creating new unserialized items, or if you do have to change the unserialized status of an existing item. That's all being managed in the admin tab. And this goes to our best practice. You should have one resource type with one unserialized record. It should be a one-to-one relationship. Okay. All right, another new resource type feature. This is for those that have a process that includes WebCheckout selecting the resource to fulfill the allocation. So whether you use the reservation by resource type, the RRT module, and you select convert to ID, or if you use the add quantity option, right, when you're creating in the timeline scheduler or in the contents tab, when you're adding a quantity, WebCheckout will select the item for the allocation. Well, the scheduler will select the item for the reservation or checkout. So what we have here, sorry, scroll too fast, is this new feature called assignment strategy. We did see this at the Checkout Central General tab. But this assignment strategy option, you're now telling the scheduler, it's going to give the scheduler a chance to find a resource based on these certain criteria. So let's review the new options, or the options that we have. So first, feasible, that is the current and default behavior. So all previous versions of WebCheckout, when the scheduler is selecting the item for you, it's going by first feasible. So the scheduler will fulfill the allocation by selecting the first available resource. This provides the fastest, the quickest results. So here's the first available, the first feasible, and it's going to provide the quickest resource to fulfill that allocation. The next option is maximize availability. The scheduler will make an attempt to concentrate allocations to the fewest number of circulating resources within the resource type. So it's going to try to assign the fewest number of resources. So the best way to think of this option is if your checkout center has more walk-ups and fewer reservations, when WebCheckout is reserving items, it will reserve it to the fewest number of items. So let's say you have 10 items, 1 and 2 will have all the reservations that WebCheckout will try to reserve. So then 3 through 10 will be available for the walk-ups. And then we have spread usage. For spread usage, the scheduler makes an effort to evenly spread the number of allocations across the circulating resources within that resource type. So this option is recommended if you'd like to evenly distribute the number of checkouts among the resources. Okay. So with spread usage and maximize availability, these options will take time for the scheduler to find a resource that meets the requirement. So at the checkout center, we recommend that the strategy stays first feasible at the checkout center. And then at the resource type level, you adjust it to maximize availability or spread usage for those types that require it. Okay. All right. Okay, another new feature, we're going to switch gears here, is the policy tab within a allocation detail. So I'm going to go to my find upcoming reservations here, and we'll click on this reservation here for Bob. We now have a policies tab. This shows you all of the policies that apply to this allocation. Okay. And for those who may change the effective patron class, so the policies change for that person for that specific allocation, the effective patron class option has moved to this policies tab. So if I edit this reservation, what used to be in the people tab is now in the policies tab. So you can adjust the policy, or excuse me, the patron class just for this allocation, and then you can see what policies are now being applied to this checkout or reservation. This is, again, more information we're providing to you. Okay. All right. Now, for those who print agreement forms or invoices or tickets, there's now a feature to bulk download up to 100 files, so you can print them in bulk. So as a reminder, here is a view of my agreement form, and you guys can customize this. So in the related find screen, so find allocations, find tickets, find invoices, we'll go to find allocations here. We'll look for all my checkouts and reservations. Find. There's now a option to, hold on one second here. You now have the option to export from archive. Exporting from archive will download, will provide a zip file of all of the forms that you've selected, and you can then download, save, and then print from your computer. So this was a new feature sponsored by Emerson. They do print out their upcoming reservation forms, had that readily available. So it's a function that they needed, and we provided this new feature available in the spring release. Okay, and finally, introducing the newest member of the WebCheckout app family is the Facilities app. So I'm going to click my tiles here to open up the Facilities app. I do want to highlight here, there are new operator capabilities, manage keys. You need that manage keys operator capability to even view the facilities app. Okay. The facilities app was sponsored by the facilities management team at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The facilities team had a homegrown system which no longer fulfilled their needs. Two departments at F&M already using WebCheckout and recommended WebCheckout to the facilities team. And the facilities team did search for other companies, and they found that other companies, the systems were too complicated for their specific needs, and it lacked a focus on higher education. So this team, they were looking for a system that was easy and efficient to track key access for residential halls and dormitories, academic and administrative buildings. They wanted a software that could integrate with their higher ed systems, such as Banner. They wanted to enforce accountability and decrease loss and misplacement of keys. And then they wanted to implement a simple and easy system. And so here comes WebCheckout. So with the facilities app, here it is, and I'll zoom in so you can view it. It is outside of the core, the admin app of WebCheckout, admin side. It is its own app. You can manage key specific information such as key hook, key way, key cut, key sequence, and location information. And you can also assign keys to patrons and return keys. And most importantly, as we've learned through developing this app, we understand that key information is highly sensitive. So again, all key related information is only accessible in the facilities app, and the operator must be granted the manage key capability to access this app and key information. Okay. We also understand that those who manage keys, they don't have the need to log into WebCheckout. So all the functions and information needed to manage keys are all within this app. So from this app, you can create new records. I'm clicking on a hook. I can create a new hook record here. You can also manage the record. You can edit the information here. Okay. And then for those that assign, when you're assigning keys out, you have the option to assign and return keys all from this facilities app. In WebCheckout, if the key is assigned to a person, the chain of custody tab will show that information. It will just show the resource ID. I mean, this is still WebCheckout, so a resource ID is required. You will see a resource ID in WebCheckout for that key, but again, no other sensitive information will be visible in the admin side of WebCheckout. All of that information lives and is stored and protected in the facilities app. Right? If you are interested in the facilities app, please reach out to your account manager for more information. For those of you that have an enterprise license, the facilities app will be yours to use. But again, please reach out to your account manager or support, and one of the account managers will reach out to provide you more info. Okay, and then finally, last but not least, we did make several improvements to accessibility in Patron Portal. So for those that are not aware that we do have accessibility in Patron Portal, now there's several more items that you can tab through, and the screen reader will properly provide that information. Our release notes will have a full list of all the improvements that we've made to Patron Portal as well as the spring release. So keep an eye out for that. The spring release is expected out this June. As always, when you're ready to upgrade, please email support@webcheckout.net and we'll schedule that upgrade. All right, that is it for our presentation of the spring 2021 highlights. I will turn it over for questions.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Going back to chain of custody,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see how that looks versus the usage. I mean, what's the big difference between the two? Am I missing something here?
Sure. So we'll go to this resource here. The chain of custody, it shows you, it won't show you usage information, and it will show you who had it. The usage will actually show you like utilization time.
Mhm.
So you'll see upcoming reservations and completed checkouts.
Mhm.
This is more so just a quick way to see who had it, who has it, and then the difference for chain of custody, this is more so for those non-circulating items when you're assigning items out for long-term use, like laptops, keys. You'll manage that information in this chain of custody tab here.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question, Jeannie. How are people going paperless for agreement forms using WebCheckout?
I can share some of what I know from customer sharing, but if anyone wants to chime in and answer that question for Matt, how are you all going paperless for checkouts?
I can jump in a little bit, Jeannie.
Please.
Kelly Gottesman from Wayne State in Detroit. Actually following, I think it was either you or Brittany's lead with our patron portal, there's a link to our usage agreement form and it's a required field when they're in the patron portal, whether it's we have 2 checkout centers in our particular area, one for checking out equipment and one for reserving open edit space and other spaces. So they agree to those terms and conditions, which were in the past a paper form or a Google form that students would sign the first day of classes, etc. So now there's no paper. They hit the shiny button to agree to that. And if they don't, then they can't, it's one of the required fields. So basically they can't, check out or reserve until that is clicked off on.
Thanks, Kelly. That is what we recommend, and that's what many customers we're aware of have moved to. So this is what Kelly was referring to. So if you do have patron portal, you can include your terms and agreements and a radio button. You can also link to your terms and agreements. Ours is this great, very legal Google Doc here. But certainly if you have something online, you can link your documentation here, and it is a required field. So it requires they have to click the terms and agreement terms and conditions and the submit reservation. You can't submit it until you've actually agreed to it. So that's a custom property that we've added and then made it required at the checkout center.
Okay. How does that work for walk-in customers? They have to create a reservation when they walk in.
It's a good question. Does anyone have any suggestions or your best practice or how you're currently dealing with walk-ins and agreement forms?
I can't really jump to that because we've stopped walk-ins due to a number of reasons. Everything's by appointment only, but I would assume that even at the operator's level that they could click a button when they make the reservation that says that the patron has agreed, or they have to acknowledge something. Or I guess you could go back to paper at that point, but there should be a way for that walk-in if you're creating a reservation for the user. Is that how you do it, Matt?
Yeah. We have a patron portal, and users can create a reservation, but we don't have the required field. They don't see the agreement form. We have the agreement form built in WebCheckout. And so when we create the allocation, then we get a printable copy of the agreement form with the resource detail on the form. And then we print that and they sign a hard copy.
Right. So
get rid of that.
You could take that same verbiage as long as you have access to somewhere you can host it on a server or something and point to that. And then like Jeannie said, it's the customizable properties of the patron portal where you can go in. I can even share my code. I think Brittany shared hers with me. So then I could just populate that with And it's not rocket science. You just have to put the pathway to that particular file and create the customizable field, make it required, and it's pretty much a done deal. I just don't know how that works on the walk-in if you are the person or you have, you know, staff that are creating that reservation for them.
Hi, the only other, Lewis from BronxNet, the only other workaround I could think for that walk-in scenario would be to have some sort of tablet set up, you know, where you open up the browser and you have the patron portal there set up. And then you have your staff there already, and then they can effectively immediately approve it from there.
Mhm.
Something similar to like, I don't know, like a rent-a-car. You know, you're going to go there and you're going to be pushing buttons on the screen for all the agreement forms anyway, versus having to solely rely on the staff to manually build the reservation and then, you know, I guess not select the print agreement form in that sense. But that way you have something from the patron who's actively engaging and checking a box to agree to terms.
Got
And something other to consider with emails, you can include a link to your terms and conditions. So when you create the checkout, you're assuming you're legal, and actually Utai has a question about this, it gets approved, you can possibly consider including, you know, by picking up this checkout, you agree to the terms and conditions set forth by, you know, and then include the link to your terms and conditions in the email, which they'll receive.
Right. We do that at BronxNet for the reservation approved and the pickup email as well. So we throw all the terms and conditions everywhere after they've, you know, gone through the portal to push that request through and agree to terms.
And so related to this, Utai asks, and I think this is more so for you, Kelly, does your college or unit have the backing from legal to back that digital condition?
I just replied. And so
okay.
in order to get our language, you know, to be signed off, we had to throw it by risk management here at the university. And it went back and forth just a little bit. It wasn't an arduous process. And that's the same language once it got approval that's in our usage agreement. So and it's a great question because I make the assumption, as I mentioned to Utai, that it was maybe an assumption that, you know, since it's the same language and it's a required field, is that binding, you know, because there's that language there. We say user or patron agrees to our terms and conditions. So whether or not they actually read it and just hit the shiny button, I think the onus would be on them. I guess I should check with, you know, legal to see if that's still binding, if, you know, they're not putting their signature on it per se.
Yeah, this is Utai. So at Penn State here, the digital e-signatures currently, unless you go through the Adobe, that e-signature, which is legally binding, nothing else is considered legal at the university. So and then it's very gray in terms of these check boxes. You know, we do that every day with different agreements of software, free to use software and stuff like that. But our legal, I think, has been wavering on this, and they're still deciding. And we've been wondering too, using digital signatures, like, is there a way to integrate maybe the e-signature with Adobe that's legal along with WebCheckout? But I haven't seen anything of that since. I think that's the only way our legal would sign off on that.
Does anybody use the little touch pads where, like at the bank, where you sign your signature? You put that on a form.
Yes, here at Bucknell, we use Wacom tablets, and we save the PDF after they sign it into Google Drive.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Shelley has been using that, the Wacom tablets for signing agreement forms for some time now. We actually do share that with other customers who ask how they sign, those that want to actually capture a digital signature. And actually, Shelley brings up a question. Are folks going to continue wiping down and quarantining equipment this fall?
Wyoming is just because regardless of COVID-19, equipment comes in unsanitary.
So is it a practice you've always followed and you're just continuing to?
We've always done, yeah. So we'll just keep doing it.
Kelly, you did mention that you're letting go of some of this, but still do require 24-hour receive period.
We're following, like we all are a bit, CDC guidelines, university mandates. Actually, part of our upper administration works in disease and control and stuff like that. So they've been pretty tight about it. But knowing how COVID, is transferred, and that touches one of the least manners in which it happens. We actually this winter, once with that new information came, was kind of the research back, that we moved from 48 to 24 hours on a quarantine. I do really like the received aspect. It does give us a little buffer when we need to check all the higher end equipment, make sure it's prepped and ready when it comes back in for the next user. So I think we're going to keep the 24-hour and do cleaning, but not as arduous as we have been on the equipment. So it's a little bit of both.
Thanks, Kelly. Anyone else would like to share their best practice or their practices for, or if they're not going to continue quarantining and wiping equipment? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Kevin Tracy asked, does the merge usage also apply to time as well as the number of resources within a usage group? So Kevin, if I'm understanding you correctly, we'll go back to this resource type and we'll go to the policy tab. So this resource type is inheriting policies from number 3 and they're merging. So all of these policies you see here, so I have this usage limit per day set to 20 hours. So they are shared. So these limits are shared with all of the resources within the usage group. So up to 20 hours among those resource types within the group.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes.
Yeah,
so all of
thank you,
no
Jean.
problem.
Jenny, I have a follow-up question to that, if I could.
Yeah, of course.
John Petrosky from Flashpoint Chicago.
Hi, John.
Hi there. So, because this just came up literally this week, today. So by merging these policies, we're basically going to say, as your example earlier in your presentation, there's a limit of 1 camera. So if you check out a 5D Mark III, you're not going to be able to check out a 5D Mark II as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The issue that we're running into, and I don't know if anybody else here, because Flashpoint Chicago seems unique in too many ways. We not only do we want to limit that, but we also want to limit the either or instance. In other words, if a student's going to check out an advanced camera, we don't want them checking out advanced lighting as well, right? They should either be a DP or an electrician / grip. So can we parent those then? Does that make sense?
You would group them, but you want an either or.
Correct.
So would they be? Oh, good question. But they're authorized. It's not a lack of authorization. They have access to both. You just don't want them checking them out at the same time.
Simultaneously, exactly. So I guess they would all be children of the same policy, but then that means that our cameras and our lights have to circulate, with similar
usage policies as well. Yeah,
yes, exactly. Which is not necessarily the case.
Which is not right. I hear you. I think what the feedback we'll need to see, it's possible that we'll take this as feedback and see what we could do to improve upon this when you have that either or.
I love this
scenario.
development. This is already going to help, but to take it to the next level then.
Yeah, totally. I hear you. So we'll make note of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It almost feels like they'll have to have multiple authorization sets of some sort, because I get it, because we do it at the class level where once they are in the grip department, they can only the gaffer can put the equipment request in for the advanced lighting. Same for the DP. So it's not your first and second AC, it's just the DP on that particular production. But we get into the trenches with them, like I'm the production manager for these guys, and we kind of drill it down before they get to patron portal. So it kind of cleans up back and forth kind of stuff once they're there. But, you know, I don't know if you have the kind of resources and time to do that. And if we can make it automated, that would be kind of nice. But
We certainly rely on so much of the policies to kind of automate for us from web checkout. I mean, because we're talking too then about like a student's thesis project, where it's not a class project, it's their individual thesis. And so they want to check everything out for their crew. But now we've got the problem is, some of you could probably imagine, we don't know where our gear is going to be and we know that one person whose thesis project it is not going to be able to supervise advanced, you know, camera, advanced lighting, advanced audio. So we want individual department heads at the very least to check out so that they can supervise
so there's
the rest of it.
That accountability, and they have that proficiency on the equipment. That's the tough part, because once it's out, you know, you don't know who's handling what gear. I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, you guys, for that discussion. I appreciate that. And then Utah, going back to the beginning of this, when we were talking about, or John mentioned that they're using web checkout for reserving cubicle spaces. Utah asked, will you use QR codes for viewing of schedules or using web checkout to manage cubicles? Utah, if you wanted to expand
Yes.
upon your question, feel free.
Yeah, thanks. So we're looking at a similar instance of using web checkout to manage team spaces that are generally going to be reserved only for a certain subset of students for our college, because we're in a building that's widely available to many different, you know, anybody can walk in. So, but we only want to reserve those team spaces for our students in the college. So, you know, what kind of integration will you have with those rooms? Are they, you know, we have Solstice pods. They're sort of just like wireless share pucks, but they tie into Outlook calendar. They can display what's upcoming. I know I looked at a little bit about web checkout being but integrate into different calendars, but if people keep adding or changing, does that, I think it's only one way. So that's where the question about scheduling comes in. Like if someone scans a QR code and it takes them to the web checkout portal of like you using, I guess it was a calendar for that room, will it show them all the stuff that's scheduled, but will also remove things that have been sort of canceled?
So if I believe you're referring to the ICS calendar feed that you can get from the calendar URL. Yeah, it definitely will update, it'll refresh information. So if reservations get canceled, it should be removed from the calendar. I do know in like Outlook and even iCal, you can adjust you can specify the refresh time, like every 5 minutes or 15 minutes. But Google Calendar is the only one that you cannot set a refresh time. So the information might be a little stale, but if reservations are canceled, it should be removed from the calendar feed. And if you are in Patron Portal, there's always the scheduler information. You can see if something's checkout or reserved. But that is an additional step. You do have to log into web checkout.
Yeah, so I think the calendar URL would be the most useful if we can get that displayed on the Teams room monitor. Somehow it just runs almost like a kiosk signage until they
Mhm.
get to the room to use it. Hmm.
Is there a way
Well,
to do
now
the dashboard?
they're talking about the dashboard, right?
Yeah.
Jeannie?
The dashboard will show all the upcoming checkouts and reservations.
Right. I mean, it's not a
It-
calendar interface, but at least,
No, assuming that you just have your own a login. Utah, you might be familiar with this dashboard, your outgoing and incoming, but it won't show you like all of your list of your rooms and what's checked out or what's reserved.
Right. Yeah. More specifically, it's like if a student just walks over to that Teams room and they look at the monitor, at a easily glance, they need to know if it's reserved or not reserved. They can use it until someone comes in,
Mhm.
whenever
Okay.
that schedule is.
okay, so you have an individual display for each space is what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, smart.
Utah, I can connect you with actually Kevin Tracy. Is it your team? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Is it your team that's using the calendar feeds for reserving like big machinery at SAIC?
We're
I could be.
it's not my team at SAIC. We might be doing it in the shops.
Yeah, in the shops.
Yeah. But it doesn't look like anyone from that team might be on the call.
Not from me,
today.
right?
Yeah, so yeah, no problem, Jeannie. But yeah, we're not using that at the media centers.
Right, media center. Sorry, I got you mixed up
No,
there.
no worries, no worries. We got a lot of people.
Utah, I can poach around our customers and see if there's any, or feel free to reach out to the users list, but I'm pretty sure there are customers who are using the calendar feed for just to view the reservation information when it's available
Thanks.
and when it's not. Yep, no problem. Any other questions? We have ample time here. We can always wrap up early, but
I have a question again.
yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Going back to the unserialized, how is that going to look when you're doing a new reservation under pick resources?
Yeah. Okay, so in if you currently have one resource to one resource type, your unserialized resource is under its own resource type, it's going to look exactly the same. But if you have, sorry about that. Let me go to timeline scheduler here. If you have your resources, if you have your unserialized resource under a type that has other resources, let's see, my
Go
A,
under like cable. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay.
no problem. My data is already set up that there's only one unserialized resource
Right,
under the type.
right.
If you have several resources,
Yes, I do.
when you upgrade, there's going to be another resource type, a subtype created. So if I had two resources here, there'd be a resource type would be created under AA batteries. It'd be called AA batteries -unserialized.
Okay.
And the unserialized resource will be moved under that type.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
I had a calendar question, Jeannie.
Sure.
I set calendar work hours for our checkout centers. We have multiple checkout centers and we have working hours. And I've had to make the hours not represent the actual hours because when we're doing checkouts, it's saying that the service center is not open during those times. But if I add an extra day of the week or go 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. when we actually are open 9 to 4, that error goes away. But if I set the actual hours And then we do checkouts within those hours. We get the message that we're closed when we're actually not. And the calendar reflects the actual hours. But it seemed like a glitch because I extend the hours out and then that message goes away.
Matt, we'll have to reach out to you directly after this call and see what exactly could be happening with the instance or the checkout center hours.
Understood.
So we'll be sure to follow up with you on that.
Okay.
And the new version will be available at the end of June. By the end of June, we are still putting some finishing touches on the facilities app and some still testing and making sure we've got the best app, best spring release coming at you, but by June. No further questions going once?
Jeannie Jamtrusky again,
Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead, John.
That facilities app, is that going to automatically be included, or is that an additional module that has to be purchased?
It is. It's included. You need an additional checkout center, so it may or may not be included with your existing license of the application. So, talking to your account manager, we'll be able to provide you that information.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that's part of enterprise if you have it.
Correct.
Because I'm curious, I guess I reach out to Brittany to find out, because we're, curious where we should like move to enterprise if it's like everything's included versus buying all the different modules and stuff.
Sure. Enterprise actually is it's your licensing of the number of checkouts and organizations. Even if you're enterprise, the modules they're a la carte.
Okay.
But yes, Brittany can provide you more information. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No further questions. Anyone from WebCheckout want to add anything? Okay. All right, great. 45 minutes of your day are given back to you. I hope you all use it wisely. Thank you all for spending your hour and 15 minutes with us. We really appreciate your time and engaging in this discussion. Please keep an eye out for our follow-up email with a recording to this link, or to a recording to this webinar. And of course, we'll follow up to make the announcement when the spring 2021 release is available. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.